The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor of the Four Seasons ballroom, its crystal fragments catching the light like broken dreams. Natasha Reed felt her 7-month pregnant belly jolt as her husband's hands pushed her aside, not caring that she stumbled backward in her heels. "Move, Natasha. You're embarrassing me." Cameron's voice cut through the orchestra music and polite chatter of San Francisco's elite. Around them, tech millionaires and their perfectly polished wives pretended not to notice, but Natasha could feel their stares burning into her skin. Her black sequin maternity dress, chosen so carefully to make Cameron proud tonight, now felt like a costume for a play she never auditioned for. Simone Martinez stepped smoothly into the space where Natasha had been standing, her red dress hugging curves that had never carried a child. She placed a manicured hand on Cameron's arm and smiled at the photographers capturing the Tech Innovation Awards ceremony. "Much better," Simone whispered loud enough for Natasha to hear. Natasha's hands instinctively went to her belly, where their daughter kicked as if sensing her mother's distress. 7 months of pregnancy, 3 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, pushed aside like furniture at a charity gala while her husband posed with his mistress. The baby kicked harder. "Cameron." Natasha's voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "We need to talk." He didn't even look at her. "Later, Tasha. Can't you see I'm busy?" The photographers kept snapping. Click, click, click. Each flash felt like a slap. Tomorrow these photos would be in the society pages in tech blogs everywhere. Cameron Reed, CEO of Reed Tech Solutions, with his beautiful companion at the annual gala. No mention of his pregnant wife standing 3 feet away, forgotten. Natasha felt something wet on her cheeks and realized she was crying. Not here. Not in front of all these people. Not when she was representing not just herself, but every black woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. She turned to leave, her designer heels clicking against the marble. Behind her, she heard Cameron laugh at something Simone said. That laugh used to be for her. Those photos used to include her. That life used to be theirs. But as she walked toward the exit, something inside her shifted. Maybe it was the baby's strong kicks, or maybe it was the memory of her grandmother's voice saying, "Baby, sometimes you got to fall before you remember you got wings." The hotel security guard at the door looked concerned. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Natasha wiped her tears and looked back at the ballroom one last time. Cameron was accepting his award now, Simone glowing beside him like she'd helped build his company from nothing. Like she'd supported him through the lean years. Like she'd believed in him when everyone else said he was crazy. "No," Natasha said to the security guard. "But I will be." She walked out into the San Francisco night, her hand on her belly, carrying her daughter toward a future that was suddenly unknown but entirely her own. Natasha woke up on her mother's couch with a crick in her neck and the taste of regret in her mouth. Ruth Williams was already up, moving around the kitchen of her Oakland apartment like she was preparing for war. "Baby, you sure you don't want some grits?" Ruth called out, but her voice had that careful tone that meant she was trying not to cry. "I'm sure, Mama." Natasha struggled to sit up, her belly making everything harder. The apartment smelled like coffee and Sunday morning comfort, nothing like the cold modern lines of the Marin County house she'd shared with Cameron. Ruth appeared in the doorway holding a steaming mug. She was still in her robe, her silver-streaked hair wrapped in a silk scarf, but her eyes were alert and angry. "That man called here 6 times already. What did you tell him?" "I told him if he wanted to talk to you, he should have thought about that before he pushed my pregnant daughter around like she was nothing." Ruth's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Your daddy may be gone, but I taught you better than to let some fool treat you like that." Natasha's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Cameron's face appeared on the screen, that professional headshot he used for everything. She declined the call. "He says it was a misunderstanding," Natasha said, though she didn't believe it herself. "Baby." Ruth sat down beside her, the couch creaking under their weight. "I've been married to your daddy for 32 years before the good Lord called him home. I know what a misunderstanding looks like and I know what disrespect looks like. That man chose another woman over you in front of half of San Francisco. That ain't no accident." The baby kicked, and Ruth's hand went automatically to Natasha's belly. "This little girl's gonna need a mama who knows her worth." Natasha's phone buzzed again. This time it was Jasmine. "Girl, are you okay? I saw the photos online." The photos? Natasha had forgotten about the photographers. She grabbed her laptop from her bag and opened it, her fingers shaking as she typed in the search terms. There they were. Page after page of images from last night. Cameron in his tuxedo, accepting his award with Simone beaming beside him. The two of them dancing, laughing. looking like the perfect power couple. And in the background of one shot, barely visible, a pregnant woman in black walking away. The caption read, Reed Tech CEO Cameron Reed celebrates Innovation Award with longtime girlfriend Simone Martinez. Longtime girlfriend. Ruth looked over her shoulder at the screen and made a sound like a wounded animal. Oh baby. Natasha closed the laptop. Something was hardening inside her chest, like steel forming in a forge. Mama, I need to call Jasmine. What you thinking? I'm thinking that if Cameron wants to act like I don't exist, then maybe it's time I made sure he remembers exactly who he's dealing with. Ruth smiled for the first time since Natasha had shown up at her door. Now that sounds like my daughter. Jasmine Torres had been Natasha's best friend since college, but she'd never seen her like this. Focused, determined, dangerous. They sat in Jasmine's law office downtown, documents spread across the mahogany conference table like battle plans. Jasmine specialized in family law, had seen plenty of wealthy men try to discard their wives. But Cameron Reed was about to learn that Natasha wasn't some naive girl he could push around. California's a community property state, Jasmine explained, her pen moving across legal papers. Everything acquired during the marriage gets split 50-50. And Reed Tech took off big time while you two were married. I helped build that company. Natasha's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she signed papers. I designed their offices. I hosted every client dinner. I was there for every late night, every failed pitch, every breakthrough. I know, honey. And we're gonna make sure the court knows it too. Jasmine pulled out a thick folder. I've been doing some research on your husband. Turns out Mr. Perfect has some interesting financial habits. Natasha looked up from the paperwork. What kind of habits? The kind where he's been moving money around for months. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. Almost like he was planning for this. The betrayal hit Natasha like a physical blow. He'd been planning to leave her. While she was carrying his child, while she was supporting his dreams, he was planning his exit strategy. There's more. Jasmine's voice was gentle but firm. I hired a private investigator. Simone Martinez isn't just his girlfriend. She's been on Reed Tech's payroll for 2 years as a consultant. He's been paying her through the company. Using our money to pay his mistress. Exactly. Natasha stood up and walked to the window. Below, San Francisco bustled with life, people going about their days with normal problems and normal relationships. She used to be one of them. What's our timeline? She asked. Divorce papers can be filed tomorrow. We'll seek temporary spousal support, child support, and an injunction preventing him from moving any more marital assets. Plus, we're going after emotional distress and punitive damages. And the company? Jasmine smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. You're about to own half of Reed Tech Solutions, girl. Cameron's about to find out that public humiliation comes with a very expensive price tag. Natasha's phone rang. Cameron again. This time she answered. Tasha baby, where are you? We need to talk. We're done talking, Cameron. My lawyer will be in touch. Your lawyer? Come on, don't be dramatic. It was just a party. It was our marriage, Cameron. And you threw it away for a photo opportunity. There was silence on the other end. Then, in a voice she'd never heard before, cold and calculating, You sure you want to do this, Natasha? I got lawyers too. Good ones. Natasha looked at Jasmine, who was already pulling up files on her computer. Court cases where wives had fought back. And won. Bring them, Natasha said and hung up. Within 48 hours, Cameron's lawyers had fired back with a response that made Natasha sick to her stomach. They claimed she was emotionally unstable, that the pregnancy was affecting her judgment, that she was making up stories about being pushed at the gala. But they'd made one crucial mistake. Look at this, Jasmine said, spreading the legal documents across her kitchen table. They'd moved the meeting to her apartment after Cameron's lawyers started calling Jasmine's office, trying to intimidate her. They're claiming you were never involved in building Reed Tech. Natasha's mother looked up from where she was making dinner. Ruth had insisted on coming to every meeting, claiming her daughter needed backup. Really, she just wanted to make sure Natasha was eating. That's a lie, Ruth said, her voice sharp. I got photos of Natasha at every company event, every client meeting. She designed their first office herself. Exactly. Jasmine's eyes were bright with possibility. They just gave us everything we need to prove fraud. If Natasha wasn't involved in the company, then why did Cameron put her name on all those early business loans? Why did she sign personally as collateral for their startup funding? Natasha felt the baby kick and placed her hand on her belly. Because the bank wouldn't loan to just him. His credit was terrible. So you're not just entitled to half the company as his wife, Jasmine said slowly. You're entitled to it as his business partner. The implications hit Natasha like a wave. Not half of what Cameron had built. Half of what they had built together. Her phone rang. It was Dr. Kim's office. Mrs. Reed? We need you to come in today. There's been some complications with your insurance. Natasha's blood went cold. What kind of complications? It appears your coverage has been terminated. We'll need to discuss payment options for your upcoming delivery. After hanging up, Natasha looked at Jasmine. He canceled my health insurance. Ruth dropped her wooden spoon. While you're pregnant? He's trying to force me to come back, Natasha said, but even as she said it, she knew it was worse than that. Cameron wasn't trying to win her back. He was trying to break her. That son of a... Ruth caught herself. That man has lost his mind. Jasmine was already on her laptop. Emergency injunction. We file tonight. By tomorrow morning, he'll have to reinstate your insurance and explain to a judge why he thought it was appropriate to endanger his pregnant wife's medical care. Will it work? Oh, it'll work. And more importantly, it's going to make him look like exactly what he is in front of the court. A man who puts his pride before his child's safety. That night, Natasha lay in her childhood bed in her mother's house, listening to the Oakland trains rumble past. Her belly was getting bigger every day, and soon she'd have to face bringing a daughter into this mess. But for the first time since the gala, she felt something other than despair. She felt power. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Natasha dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue maternity dress that showed her pregnancy clearly but looked professional. She wanted the judge to see exactly what Cameron had endangered. Judge Patricia Coleman was a black woman in her 50s with silver hair and no patience for nonsense. Natasha felt a flicker of hope as they entered the courtroom. Cameron sat at the defendant's table with two expensive lawyers in suits that probably cost more than most people's cars. He looked confident, like this was just another business meeting he could win with charm and money. He hadn't looked at Natasha once. Your Honor, Jasmine began, we're seeking immediate restoration of Mrs. Reed's health insurance. Mr. Reed terminated his pregnant wife's coverage in retaliation for her filing for divorce. Cameron's lead attorney, a thin man with sharp eyes, stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Reed simply made routine changes to his company's insurance policies. Any effect on Mrs. Reed was unintentional. Judge Coleman looked skeptical. Mr. Reed, is it your testimony that you accidentally canceled your pregnant wife's health insurance 3 days after she filed for divorce? Cameron stood up, straightening his tie. Your Honor, my wife has been making unreasonable demands. She's asking for medical coverage for your child, Mr. Reed. Our relationship has become complicated. Mr. Reed, Judge Coleman's voice was sharp enough to cut steel. Yes or no, did you cancel your wife's health insurance? Yes, but... While she's pregnant with your child? Cameron's lawyers were frantically passing him notes, but he was already in too deep. Your Honor, she left me. She walked out of our home. After you publicly humiliated her at a charity gala. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Coleman continued, I've seen the photographs, Mr. Reed. The ones where you're posing with another woman while your pregnant wife stands in the background looking distressed. That was taken out of context. The context, Mr. Reed, is that you are about to become a father, and instead of protecting the mother of your child, you're playing financial games that could endanger both her and your baby's health. Natasha felt tears threatening, but these were different tears. Someone in power was finally seeing the truth. Mrs. Reed's insurance will be reinstated immediately, Judge Coleman continued. Mr. Reed, you will also pay for any medical expenses she has incurred since the cancellation, and you will establish a temporary support account of $50,000 to ensure she has access to proper prenatal care. $50,000? Cameron's voice cracked. Did I stutter, Mr. Reed? After the hearing, Natasha and Jasmine stood on the courthouse steps. The morning fog was burning off, and San Francisco was spreading out below them like a promise. That was beautiful, Jasmine said. Judge Coleman doesn't play. Natasha's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the court report in the Chronicle. You go, girl. A friend. Then another. Team Natasha all the way. And another. Cameron Reed is trash. You deserve better. Jazz, Natasha said slowly. Are people taking sides? Jasmine was looking at her own phone, her eyes wide. Girl, you're trending on Twitter. #Justice for Natasha. Natasha looked at her phone again. Hundreds of messages. Comments on news articles. Women sharing their own stories of betrayal and comeback. For the first time in weeks, Natasha smiled. Really smiled. She wasn't fighting this battle alone. Ruth's apartment had become command central. Every surface was covered with legal documents, printouts of social media posts, and casseroles from church ladies who'd heard about Natasha's situation. Sister Patterson brought sweet potato pie, Ruth announced, coming through the door with yet another covered dish. And she said if you need character witnesses, half the congregation saw Cameron talking to that girl at the church fundraiser last year. Natasha looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reading supportive messages from strangers. He brought Simone to church events? Introduced her as a business associate, but Sister Patterson said the way they were looking at each other wasn't about no business. The baby kicked hard and Natasha winced. At 8 months pregnant, everything was getting more difficult. But the support from her community was giving her strength she didn't know she had. Jasmine burst through the door waving a folder. You are not going to believe what our private investigator found. What now? Ruth asked, setting down the pie. Cameron's been planning this for over a year. The offshore accounts, the shell companies moving money around, it all started right after Natasha got pregnant. Natasha felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He's been planning to leave me since I told him about the baby? It gets worse. Simone Martinez? She's not just some marketing consultant. She's been working as an industrial spy, stealing client information from Redtech's competitors and passing it to Cameron. That's corporate espionage, Ruth said, though she pronounced it espionage, in a way that made it sound even more criminal. Which is a federal crime, Jasmine confirmed. And if Cameron knew about it, which the evidence suggests he did, then he's been using illegally obtained information to build his company's success. Natasha stood up and walked to the window. Outside, kids were playing in the street while their mothers watched from stoops, the kind of community she'd grown up in. The kind Cameron had always seemed slightly uncomfortable around. What does this mean for us? It means Cameron's about to have bigger problems than divorce court. It also means that any profits Redtech made using stolen information could be subject to federal seizure. Natasha's phone rang. Cameron's picture appeared on the screen, but this time he looked different. Desperate. Tasha, we need to talk. Really talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me somewhere. Please. There was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Fear. The coffee shop on Telegraph Avenue, Natasha said. 1 hour. And Cameron? I'm bringing my lawyer. After she hung up, Ruth was shaking her head. Baby, you sure about this? I'm sure about one thing, Mama. I'm not that scared woman who got pushed around at a gala anymore. If Cameron wants to talk, he can do it on my terms. Jasmine was already packing her briefcase. This should be interesting. The coffee shop was crowded with Berkeley students and local artists, the kind of diverse, creative space that represented everything Cameron claimed to support but had gradually distanced himself from as his wealth grew. He was already there when Natasha and Jasmine arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his hands wrapped around a cup like he was trying to steal its warmth. He looked older than she remembered, stress lines around his eyes, his usually perfect hair slightly messed. Tasha. He stood up when he saw her, his eyes immediately going to her belly. You look pregnant, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. Very pregnant with your daughter. Jasmine sat beside Natasha, her briefcase on the table like a weapon. Cameron eyed it nervously. I heard about the federal investigation, he said quietly. From your lawyers? From Simone. She's scared, Tasha. Really scared. Natasha almost laughed. She should be. Corporate espionage is serious. Cameron leaned forward. I didn't know. Not at first. By the time I figured out what she was doing, the company was already using the information. I couldn't just throw it all away. So you chose to keep the stolen information and the woman who stole it. I chose to protect what we built. What we built, Cameron. I was there for every late night, every pitch, every setback. I put my name on those loans when banks wouldn't trust you. And the first time things got really successful, you decided I was excess baggage. Cameron was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. I don't know how to fix this, he said finally. Jasmine spoke up. You could start by telling the truth to the federal investigators. If I do that, I'll lose everything. The company, the money, everything we worked for. You already lost everything that mattered, Natasha said. You lost your family. The baby kicked and Natasha put her hand on her belly. Cameron's eyes followed the movement, and for a moment, he looked like the man she'd fallen in love with. The one who used to talk about their future, their children, the empire they'd build together. She's really active, Natasha said softly. Can I? Cameron reached out his hand, then stopped. Can I feel her? Natasha looked at Jasmine, who shrugged. This wasn't in any legal playbook. She took Cameron's hand and placed it on her belly. The baby immediately kicked against his palm, and Cameron's eyes filled with tears. She's strong, he whispered. She'll have to be, Natasha said. With the father she's getting. Cameron pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. What do you want from me, Tasha? I want you to do the right thing. For once in your life, just do the right thing. And what's that? Jasmine opened her briefcase and pulled out a document. Full disclosure to the federal investigators. Transfer of 60% of Reed Tech to Natasha as primary shareholder. Compensation for her contributions and emotional damages. Full child support and alimony. And a public apology. Cameron stared at the paper. 60%? That would make her the majority owner. Of a company she helped build with her own credit and collateral, Jasmine said. Seems fair to me. And if I don't agree? Then we see you in court, Natasha said, standing up. The movement was difficult with her belly, but she managed it with dignity. And Cameron? Every day you wait, this gets worse for you. The federal investigation, the media attention, the fact that you're fighting your pregnant wife in court while your girlfriend faces criminal charges. How do you think that looks to your clients? She left him sitting there, staring at the document that would change everything. The call came at 3 a.m. Natasha was up anyway. Pregnancy insomnia had her on a weird schedule, when her phone rang with an unknown number. Mrs. Reed? This is Detective Angela Brooks with the FBI White-Collar Crime Unit. We need to speak with you. 2 hours later, Natasha sat in a federal building downtown, Jasmine beside her, facing two agents who looked like they'd been up all night. Mr. Reed came in yesterday, Detective Brooks explained. He's cooperating fully with our investigation into industrial espionage at Reed Tech Solutions. What does that mean for Natasha? Jasmine asked. It means she's in the clear. Mr. Reed was very specific that she had no knowledge of Ms. Martinez's activities and no involvement in any illegal aspects of the business. Natasha felt relief flood through her. And Cameron? That depends on how much he knew and when he knew it. But Mrs. Reed, there's something else you should know. Detective Brooks pulled out a thick file. Reed Tech's government contracts are worth about $40 million. If the company used illegally obtained information to secure those contracts, they could be subject to federal penalties and contract cancellation. Which means the company could be worthless in 6 months. Jasmine and Natasha exchanged looks. All those legal papers demanding 60% of Reed Tech might be meaningless if there was no Reed Tech left to divide. However, Detective Brooks continued, if the company cooperates fully, shows willingness to make restitution, and implements new oversight procedures, the government might be willing to renegotiate the contracts under new leadership. New leadership? Someone with a clean record. Someone the government can trust. The room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Finally, Natasha spoke. You're talking about me. You built the company alongside your husband. You have a business degree from Berkeley. You're untainted by the scandal. And frankly, Mrs. Reed, your story has captured a lot of public attention. The government likes to see justice done, especially when it involves supporting a woman who was wronged. That afternoon, Natasha sat in her mother's kitchen, trying to process what had happened. Ruth was making cornbread, the smell filling the apartment with comfort. So let me get this straight, Ruth said, checking the oven. The government wants you to run the company? They want someone clean to take over. Someone who can rebuild trust with their clients. And Cameron? House arrest while he cooperates with the investigation. He'll probably avoid prison if he keeps helping them build the case against other companies doing the same thing. Ruth pulled the cornbread out of the oven, golden brown and perfect. And what do you want to do? Natasha put her hands on her belly. The baby was due in 3 weeks. Soon she'd be a single mother trying to rebuild her life. I want to take it, she said. I want to take the company and turn it into something good. Something I can be proud to tell my daughter about. Ruth smiled and started cutting the cornbread. Then that's what you'll do. The Reed Tech offices look different now. Gone were the aggressive metal and glass decorations Cameron had favored. In their place, Natasha had brought warmth, plants, natural wood, photos of diverse teams working together. The nameplate on the CEO office door read, Natasha Reed, Chief Executive Officer. It was her first day back since the gala and she was nervous. But she was also 8.5 months pregnant and running on determination and stubbornness. Mrs. Reed? Her new assistant, a young black woman named Destiny, poked her head into the office. The department heads are ready for the all-hands meeting. Natasha stood up carefully, smoothing her maternity dress. Let's do this. The conference room was packed. Employees who had watched their company nearly collapse under scandal were waiting to see what their new leader would say. Good morning, Natasha began, her voice steady. I know this has been a difficult time for all of us. When I started this company with Cameron, our dream was to build something that would make technology more accessible and fair for everyone. She paused, looking around the room at faces that showed everything from hope to skepticism. That dream got lost somewhere along the way. But I'm here to tell you that we're going to find it again. She clicked to her first slide, a photo of a diverse group of engineers working on laptops. Reed Tech 2.0 isn't going to be about who we can beat or what information we can get ahead of our competitors. It's going to be about what we can build together. We're going to focus on technology that serves communities, that creates opportunities, that makes people's lives better. An older programmer raised his hand. What about the government contracts? We're keeping them. But we're going to earn them the right way this time. With innovation, hard work, and integrity. After the meeting, Natasha was walking back to her office when she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She stopped, breathing through it, waiting for it to pass. Mrs. Reed? Destiny was beside her immediately. Are you okay? I think, another contraction hit, stronger this time. I think my daughter has decided she's ready to meet the world. 2 hours later, Natasha was in a delivery room at UCSF, her mother holding one hand while Jasmine held the other. The contractions were coming fast now, and between them she could hear the sounds of the hospital. Nurses talking, machines beeping, life continuing all around her. One more push, Dr. Kim encouraged. I can see her head. Natasha bore down with everything she had, pouring all her strength, all her pain, all her hope into bringing her daughter into the world. And then she heard it. The most beautiful sound in the universe. Her daughter's first cry. She's perfect, Dr. Kim said, placing the baby on Natasha's chest. Absolutely perfect. Natasha looked down at the tiny face, the perfect fingers, the eyes that were trying so hard to focus on this new world. Hello, baby girl, she whispered. Welcome to your life. Ruth was crying. Jasmine was crying. Even Dr. Kim was wiping her eyes. What's her name? Destiny asked. She had driven to the hospital as soon as she heard, claiming someone needed to represent the Reed Tech family. Natasha had been thinking about this for months. What do you name a daughter who will grow up knowing her father chose another woman over her? What do you call a child who represents a new beginning after everything falls apart? Hope, Natasha said. Her name is Hope Reed. 1 year later, Natasha stood in the same ballroom where her marriage had ended. But this time she was here for the Women in Tech Awards and she was the one being honored. Hope slept peacefully in her stroller beside the table, 10 months old and already showing signs of her mother's determination. She had Cameron's eyes but Natasha's stubborn chin, and she was the most beautiful thing Natasha had ever created. And this year's Innovation and Leadership Award goes to Natasha Reed, CEO of Reed Tech Solutions, for her work in transforming a struggling company into a model of ethical business practices and community engagement. The applause was thunderous. Natasha stood up, smoothed her black dress, not a maternity dress this time, and walked to the podium. The same podium where Cameron had accepted his award while she stood forgotten in the background. Thank you, she began, looking out at an audience that included many of the same people who had watched her humiliation a year ago. When I was last in this room I was a different person. I was someone who had forgotten her own worth, who had allowed someone else's vision of success to replace her own dreams. She found Cameron in the audience. He was sitting at a back table, alone, looking older and somehow smaller than she remembered. Their eyes met for a moment and he nodded slightly. An acknowledgement, maybe even an apology. But sometimes the most devastating moments in our lives become the catalyst for our greatest growth. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to discover what we actually need. She clicked to her first slide, a photo of the new Reed Tech headquarters in Oakland with solar panels and community gardens on the roof. Reed Tech today employs 200 people, 60% of whom are women or people of color. We've developed technology that's being used in underserved schools, community health centers, and small businesses that couldn't afford enterprise solutions before. Another slide. Young students using tablets designed by Reed Tech to access educational programs. We've learned that true innovation doesn't come from stealing other people's ideas. It comes from listening to communities that have been ignored, solving problems that matter, and building technology that serves humanity instead of just serving profit. The applause grew louder. Natasha looked down at Hope, who had woken up and was waving her tiny fists in the air like she was celebrating too. I want to thank the village that raised me up when I was down. My mother, who taught me that resilience is a family tradition. My best friend Jasmine, who showed me that fighting back is always an option. The women in my community who proved that supporting each other is the strongest force in the universe. She paused, gathering her thoughts for the conclusion. And I want to thank my daughter, Hope. She reminds me every day that we don't just survive difficult times, we use them to build something better. For her, for ourselves, and for every woman who will come after us. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. As Natasha walked back to her table, people reached out to shake her hand, to congratulate her, to tell her their own stories of comeback and resilience. At her table, Ruth was beaming with pride. Your daddy would be so proud, baby. Jasmine was wiping tears from her eyes. Girl, you made me cry in public. That's unprofessional. And Hope was reaching up toward her mother, babbling in the language only babies know, but somehow Natasha understood perfectly. Later that night, after the awards and the photos and the interviews with tech blogs wanting to know how she'd turned everything around, Natasha sat in her Oakland apartment, the one she'd bought 6 blocks from her mother's place, feeding Hope her bedtime bottle. The apartment was small but warm, filled with plants and photos and the kind of comfortable chaos that comes with being a working single mother. Through the window, she could see the lights of San Francisco across the bay, twinkling like promises. Her phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. Congratulations. She's lucky to have you as a mother. Natasha looked down at Hope, whose eyes were getting heavy as she finished her bottle. No, baby girl, she whispered. I'm the lucky one. She carried Hope to her crib, kissed her forehead, and stood watching her sleep for a moment. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, a company to run, a daughter to raise, a future to build. But tonight, in the quiet of her own home, surrounded by the love she'd chosen instead of the love that had chosen to leave her, Natasha felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She was exactly where she was supposed to be.